Breaking a historical enigma. Edward III's revenge, the price of deceit. In the history of monarchical dynasties, there are many mysteries, hidden from contemporaries, and unknown today even to professional historians. However, one secret of the British monarchy should become public, and we will now reveal it. 2022. In the picturesque countryside of the Cotswolds, Gloucestershire, lie the ruins of Hailes Abbey. Founded in the 13th century, this abbey was once one of England's most important pilgrimage sites, due to a famous relic, the alleged vessel of the Holy Blood of Christ. After the dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII, it fell into disrepair and became romantic ruins. It was on this very ground that a team of archaeologists from English heritage was conducting planned surveys. Their initial goal was not a sensational discovery, but a routine investigation, to study the remains of the foundations to create a more accurate map of the once magnificent abbey. Instead, they made a discovery that could rewrite English history. A limestone sarcophagus, sealed for nearly 700 years, was opened. Inside lay a skeleton with a sword wound through its spine. But the real shock was the silver plaque on its chest. Non sum rex, I am no king. Radiocarbon dating placed the death between 1330 and 1340. This is the exact time when Roger Mortimer, the man who overthrew a king, was executed at Tyburn. Who lies in this tomb? And why was he buried with all the honors, if he was a traitor? To understand this mystery, we must return to the 14th century, to the reign of Edward II, a man born on April 25, 1284. He was the first English monarch to receive the title of Prince of Wales. Outwardly, he was tall and stately, but his character was weak and indecisive. Contemporaries often criticized him for his hobbies, which were considered unworthy of a king. He loved digging ditches and engaging in crafts with commoners. This was in stark contrast to his father, the mighty Edward I, the Hammer of the Scots. But his main weakness was his inability to govern, and, according to chronicles, his attachment to favorites. The knight Piers Gaveston held a special place among them. Edward not only showered him with titles, making him Earl of Cornwall, but also, according to some sources, gave him jewels that should have belonged to his wife. This alienated the king's powerful barons, and, most importantly, his wife, Isabella of France. This attachment and the subsequent chaos in governance led to one of the most shameful pages in English history, the defeat at Bannockburn in 1314, where Robert the Bruce's army annihilated the vastly superior English forces. It was this humiliation that became the final straw, undermining the king's authority. Now, we must mention Isabella. She was a fantastically interesting woman, dubbed the She-Wolf of France by her contemporaries. The daughter of the powerful French king Philip IV the Fair, she was raised at Europe's most brilliant court and had no intention of being a mere decoration for her unloved husband. She bore Edward 4 children, but was humiliated by him and his favorites. Her revenge was cold and calculated. In 1325, Edward II sent her to Paris for negotiations with her brother, King Charles IV. It was there, away from her husband's court, that she met with an exile, Roger Mortimer. Mortimer was a legendary figure, a powerful baron whose lands covered almost half of Wales. In 1322, he rebelled against Edward II and was imprisoned in the Tower. It was believed he would be executed, but in 1323, Mortimer made a daring escape by drugging his guards and fleeing in disguise as a priest. He was the man Isabella had been waiting for. In Paris, Isabella and Mortimer became not only lovers, but also powerful political allies. They planned an invasion, securing the support of European rulers. In the autumn of 1326, they landed on the coast of England with a small but well-armed force. Surprisingly, they were not met as invaders. London, where the people had been driven to despair by Edward II's rule, welcomed them as liberators. The king was abandoned by everyone, and, while trying to flee to Wales, was captured. He was sent to Berkeley Castle, and from that moment, his fate was sealed. The official version states that Edward II died a natural death on September 21st, 1327. However, this version was quickly cast into doubt. One of the most detailed and horrific accounts is found in the Chronicle of Geoffrey le Baker. Who was Geoffrey le Baker? He was a humble clerk from Oxfordshire who wrote his chronicle several years after the events. What makes his testimony so valuable is that, in his own words, he received information from William Bishop, an associate of one of the king's alleged murderers, Sir Thomas Gurney. Baker describes in detail how the king's body was found without external injuries, but with signs of internal burns. He writes plainly that Edward II was smothered with pillows, and then, to conceal the murder, a red-hot poker was inserted into his body through a hollow horn. The location of Edward II's burial in Gloucester Cathedral raises questions. Why would the murderers give the deposed king such a magnificent tomb, one of the most splendid in England? It was a clear act designed to appease public opinion and prevent the creation of a martyr's cult. But perhaps it was an attempt to allay suspicion and conceal the truth. For 3 years, Mortimer ruled England as the de facto king, acting on behalf of the young Edward III. He minted coins with his likeness, held lavish feasts, and ostentatiously copied royal authority. However, for the country, it was a time of chaos and discontent. After seizing power, Mortimer failed to win the trust of the people and the nobility. He handed out lands and titles to his supporters that once belonged to his enemies, arousing the hatred of powerful barons. The constant humiliation of the young King Edward III, whom he kept under tight control, also did little to increase his popularity. His rule ended on the night of November 29, 1330. By then, the 17-year-old Edward III, tired of his puppet role, had secured the support of loyal barons. It was they who helped him enter Nottingham Castle through a secret tunnel, known as Mortimer's Tunnel, which can still be seen today. Mortimer was caught by surprise, arrested, and his rule, built on deceit and violence, collapsed in an instant. Parliamentary records unequivocally state that he was executed by hanging at Tyburn. This was a deliberate act of humiliation. Tyburn was a place of execution for commoners, and hanging was considered a dishonorable death for a nobleman. But, as is often the case, official chronicles are only part of the truth. A 15th-century medieval manuscript, held in the archives of the Greyfriars Monastery and now known as MS Roll, B 355 from the Bodleian Library, contains a remarkable entry. It reads, "Under cover of darkness, the brothers of Christ removed the body before dawn." This single line creates a huge discrepancy between official history and the testimony written by people who may have been involved in the events. This detail raises many questions. Why would influential monks, who should have been on the king's side, take such a risk? Why was the body of the most powerful man in England secretly removed? And most importantly, if someone else was hanged at Tyburn, who was he? And where did the real Roger Mortimer disappear to? Modern science offers new evidence. In 2018, geneticist Dr. Tori King conducted a DNA analysis of the skeleton from the sarcophagus at Hales Abbey. She is a world-renowned expert who led the team that identified the remains of King Richard III, found under a car park in Leicester. This project, dubbed the greatest genetic investigation in history, made her name synonymous with science and history. That's why, when the opportunity arose to examine the remains from Hales Abbey, Dr. King saw another chance to shed light on a long-standing historical crime. She and her team conducted a DNA analysis comparing the skeleton's haplotype with living descendants of Mortimer's sister, Joan de Genneville. The result showed a 61% match. This is not conclusive evidence, but it is certainly a significant lead. The burial in a lead-lined sarcophagus. reminiscent of a royal burial, the inscription, "I am no king," and the testimony of the body's removal after the execution. All of this indicates that someone went to unprecedented lengths to conceal the truth. So, we are left with the following facts. On one hand, the official parliamentary records of Mortimer's execution at Tyburn. On the other hand, archaeological evidence, a body secretly buried with honors at Hayley's Abbey, and the unique plaque, Non Sum Rex. These are not just words, they are a message that could have been written by Mortimer himself, or by someone who wanted to emphasize his status as a king without a crown. Perhaps we should give a chance to the hypothesis that Edward III, a young but calculating king, understood that a public execution of Mortimer would make him a martyr to some of the nobility, and his mother, Isabella, could become even more dangerous. Instead, he made a move worthy of a chess player. He faked the execution and allowed Mortimer to escape, but on the condition that he would disappear forever and never return. Why? Because for Edward III, this was not just revenge for his father, but a demonstration of his power. The cruelest revenge was not to kill Mortimer, but to strip him of everything: power, name, history. To force him to live in exile, knowing that the world believed him to be dead, while Edward III ruled England. In the lead-lined sarcophagus, perhaps lies the body of another man, executed on the king's orders and buried with an intriguing inscription to completely obscure the trail.